It was just after sunrise when every conversation in the crowded neighborhood cafe suddenly fell silent. A sleek black luxury car stopped outside the tiny corner shop where construction workers, delivery drivers, and exhausted parents usually grabbed the cheapest coffee in town. Moments later, one of the richest women in the city stepped inside, dressed with quiet elegance instead of flashy wealth. Without warning, she walked past every empty chair, stopped in front of a tired single father sharing a small breakfast with his little daughter, and gently asked the question that would change both of their lives forever. She had no idea that the man sitting across from her had already been saving her heart for years without ever expecting to meet her. If you believe that kindness always finds its way back, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Be Kind Always for more emotional stories that remind us how powerful compassion can be. Morning sunlight spilled across the worn sidewalks of Brookhaven as people hurried through another ordinary weekday, but for Rowan Mercer, nothing about life had ever felt ordinary. At only 34 years old, he carried the weight of 2 lives on his shoulders. Since losing his wife, Maren, to an unexpected illness 6 years earlier, every sunrise had become another promise to keep. He would be both father and mother to his daughter, Nia. He would work every extra shift. He would hide every tear. Most importantly, he would never allow his daughter to believe that she had less love simply because she had lost one parent. Rowan worked as a maintenance technician at the city's public hospital. The pay barely covered rent, groceries, school supplies, and the endless bills that arrived faster than he could earn enough to pay them. Every morning before work, he braided Nia's curly hair after watching dozens of online tutorials late at night. Every lunch break was spent comparing grocery prices instead of buying himself food. Every evening ended with homework, bedtime stories, and quiet moments staring at unpaid invoices spread across the kitchen table while pretending everything would somehow work itself out. Despite the constant struggle, Rowan had never become bitter. His coworkers often noticed that he volunteered for the hardest shifts, stayed late to repair broken equipment, and quietly comforted worried families waiting outside operating rooms. Few knew the secret he carried deep inside his heart. Nearly 8 years earlier, after learning that his blood carried an exceptionally rare genetic match, Rowan had enrolled in an anonymous medical donor program. He believed that if someone somewhere needed a chance to live, and he could help without expecting anything in return, then it was simply the right thing to do. He never asked who received his donations. Hospital policies protected everyone's identities. Sometimes he wondered if those anonymous gifts had saved a child, a mother, or an elderly grandfather. Then he would smile to himself and return to work, satisfied knowing that somewhere another family might still be together. Across the city lived Celeste Ashcroft, founder of one of the country's fastest-growing technology companies. Magazine covers described her as fearless, brilliant, and unstoppable. Television interviews praised her leadership, her charitable foundations, and her remarkable business instincts. Yet none of those headlines ever mentioned the quiet truth hidden beneath tailored suits and confident smiles. Years before becoming one of the wealthiest women in the country, Celeste had been fighting a rare autoimmune disease that slowly destroyed her health. Doctors warned her family that finding a compatible donor would be almost impossible. As months passed, hope faded until one anonymous donor entered the registry. That single act of generosity changed everything. Experimental treatments became possible. Recovery slowly replaced despair. Her life continued because someone she would never know had decided that a stranger's future mattered. Every anniversary of her recovery, Celeste secretly visited the hospital chapel. She never prayed for wealth or success. She simply whispered gratitude to the unknown person whose kindness had given her another sunrise. Success transformed every part of her life except one. The higher she climbed, the lonelier life became. Business meetings replaced friendships. Headlines replaced honest conversations. Invitations surrounded her, but genuine connection became increasingly rare. That particular morning, overwhelmed after another exhausting board meeting scheduled before dawn, Celeste asked her driver to stop at the small neighborhood cafe instead of returning to her office tower. She wanted one ordinary cup of coffee somewhere nobody expected billionaires to appear. Inside, she noticed something unusual. A little girl sat beside her father, sharing one cinnamon roll between them. Before taking her own bite, she carefully tore off the larger half and placed it on her father's napkin when she thought he wasn't looking. Rowan quietly switched the pieces back while pretending to check his phone. The tiny exchange lasted only seconds, yet it carried more love than any expensive gala Celeste had attended in years. Without thinking, she walked over. She smiled softly and asked if she could sit with them. The cafe owner nearly dropped a stack of mugs in disbelief. Other customers stared, assuming cameras must be hidden somewhere. But there were none. There was only one lonely billionaire and one exhausted father sharing breakfast with his daughter. As they talked, Celeste was surprised by Rowan's calm honesty. He never complained about raising Nia alone. He never spoke with resentment about long workdays or financial pressure. Instead, he described funny bedtime adventures, school art projects taped across their apartment walls, and his daughter's dream of becoming a veterinarian because she wanted every frightened animal to know it was safe. Nia happily showed Celeste a notebook filled with colorful drawings of rescued dogs, smiling cats, and birds with oversized wings. Every page carried hopeful messages written in careful handwriting. Everyone deserves another chance. Kindness helps people heal. Love makes families. Something inside Celeste quietly shifted. For the first time in years, she wasn't being admired because of her fortune. Rowan had no interest in discussing business or asking for favors. In fact, he didn't recognize her at all. When their breakfast ended, Celeste paid for everyone's meals in the cafe before quietly leaving. Rowan thanked the kind stranger with genuine appreciation, believing she was simply another generous customer. But their story was only beginning. Days later, Celeste couldn't stop thinking about the father and daughter whose happiness seemed stronger than circumstances. Curious, she asked one trusted assistant to discreetly learn more about Rowan, making it clear she wanted no invasion of privacy and absolutely no interference in his life. The report arrived 2 days later. Single father. Hospital maintenance technician. Outstanding employee. Never accepted charity. Anonymous volunteer donor. Those final 3 words immediately caught her attention. Anonymous volunteer donor. An uneasy feeling settled over her as memories returned from years earlier. Her own donor had been described exactly the same way in confidential hospital records she was allowed to review after recovering. The dates matched almost perfectly. Unable to ignore the possibility, Celeste contacted the hospital's ethics department, requesting permission to send a confidential letter through official channels. Policies still protected donor identities, but in rare circumstances, if both donor and recipient independently agreed to disclosure, contact could be arranged. Weeks passed. Rowan received an unexpected envelope at home. Inside was a carefully written letter explaining that someone whose life had been saved through the donor program wished to express gratitude if he felt comfortable revealing his identity. He stared at the paper for a long time. He had never donated expecting recognition. He almost declined. But Nia gently reminded him that maybe someone simply wanted to say thank you. After thoughtful reflection, Rowan signed the consent form. So did Celeste. Several weeks later, they were invited separately to the hospital's quiet memorial garden. Neither knew who the other would meet. When Rowan arrived carrying his worn backpack after finishing an overnight shift, he froze. Standing beneath blooming white magnolia trees was the same elegant woman from the cafe. Celeste turned. Their eyes met. The hospital coordinator quietly explained the truth before respectfully stepping away. For several long moments neither person spoke. The impossible suddenly became real. The stranger who had shared breakfast with Rowan had unknowingly been living because of his anonymous donations years before. The quiet maintenance worker standing before Celeste had unknowingly preserved the future of a woman who would eventually create thousands of jobs, donate millions to hospitals, and fund children's education across the country. Neither had known. Neither had expected anything. Both simply stood there overwhelmed by the invisible thread that had connected their lives for nearly a decade. Tears filled Celeste's eyes as she struggled to process the enormity of the moment. Every success she had celebrated suddenly traced back to one selfless decision made by a man who could barely afford groceries for his own family. Rowan felt equally overwhelmed. He insisted he had done nothing extraordinary. He explained that helping someone survive had always seemed like the natural choice. Celeste realized something remarkable. The world celebrated billionaires for writing large checks. Yet the greatest gift she had ever received came from someone who possessed almost nothing except compassion. From that day forward, an unexpected friendship slowly grew. Not built on money. Not built on obligation. Built on gratitude and mutual respect. Celeste often joined Rowan and Nia for simple weekend breakfasts. She laughed more during those humble mornings than during lavish corporate celebrations. Nia proudly introduced Celeste as our bonus family, making everyone nearby smile. Without embarrassing Rowan, Celeste quietly created scholarship programs for children of single parents, expanded anonymous donor awareness campaigns, and invested heavily in improving conditions for hospital support staff. She refused to name any project after herself. Instead, every initiative carried one simple message. Kindness creates futures we may never live long enough to witness. Months later, Rowan finally accepted one gift from Celeste after much persuasion. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't an expensive car. It was a fully funded veterinary education trust for Nia, redeemable whenever she chose to pursue her dream. Rowan cried that evening after putting his daughter to bed. Not because of the money, but because someone had seen their struggles without making them feel small. Years passed. Nia grew into a compassionate young woman whose love for animals never faded. Inspired by both her father and Celeste, she volunteered at shelters, organized neighborhood adoption events, and eventually entered veterinary school with the same gentle heart she had shown while sharing a cinnamon roll years before. Rowan continued working at the hospital, eventually becoming supervisor of maintenance services. Younger employees admired him not because he was famous, but because he treated every cleaner, nurse, doctor, and visitor with equal dignity. Celeste remained successful, but her definition of wealth changed forever. She measured prosperity not by stock prices but by lives quietly transformed. Every year on the anniversary of their first cafe meeting, the three of them returned to the same tiny table. They ordered one cinnamon roll, and they always split it into 3 equal pieces. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can echo across years, please like this video, share it with someone you care about, leave a comment below, and subscribe to Be Kind Always so together we can spread more stories that inspire hope and compassion. Special request comment. Kindness always comes back. If you believe one good deed can change a life forever. As evening sunlight painted the city in warm shades of gold, countless people walked past one another without realizing how deeply their lives could become connected through simple acts of generosity. A father who expected nothing more than another difficult day had unknowingly given a future to a woman who would later protect the dreams of his daughter. A billionaire searching for peace discovered that the richest person she would ever meet wore worn work boots instead of polished shoes. Their lives proved that true kindness asks for no applause, seeks no reward, and often works quietly behind the scenes until the perfect moment reveals its beautiful purpose. Sometimes the greatest miracles are not dramatic rescues or impossible fortunes. Sometimes they begin with an ordinary question spoken over a simple breakfast in the light of a new day. Can I sit with you? And from that single moment, 3 lonely hearts discovered that the strongest families are not always connected by blood, but by compassion, sacrifice, gratitude, and the courage to care for a stranger long before knowing their name.